All right, we are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Our guest, Davidson County Sheriff Daron Hall. And we're going to take some of the phone calls here in a moment. As again, we're going to talk about a broad range of topics this morning. But one of them, of course, is as he was discussing with us the issue of ICE. And we're going to start. We'll switch the camera here in a moment. But let's take a call from Joe. Joe, good morning. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Nick.
Morning, Joe.
Good morning, Sheriff.
Good morning, Joe.
I get the ICE thing. This whole immigration thing is just a big mess to begin with. But I understand exactly what you're saying and what's happened here. So people need to get off of it and understand it a little bit. But I got a couple of questions. I noticed where the jail is going to be like $17 million over budget. Would this have occurred if they had built it on Harding Place? If you can answer that. And the metro-style government, in my estimation, I've said this before, especially as far as the police department and the sheriff's department, is antiquated. It's not a good system, and the Metro Police Department they're overloaded, working traffic and trying to. It's getting where it's hard to get anybody to come in a neighborhood situation.
Joe just hit on two things that I'm going to want to follow up on, especially the second point there. Real quickly, before we move on from the ICE issue, and we may get some more calls on that, going to the break, I was asking you, all right, if it's not changing a lot, what kind of distractions were there? I mean, you could have just left it as is, and it's not really radically changing things. Why did you decide to make this move?
Yeah, Nick, probably the most disappointing part of this whole story is I want everybody to understand what we're talking about. We're talking about the housing part. We're not talking about a requirement that we participate with ICE. That's a state law. So the end of the contract, I'm afraid the public believes that means there's no more cooperation between ICE and the sheriff's office. We have to do that by law, and we are going to do that. The contract is not something that every county does. Hardly any counties do it around, not because of the politics, but because, quite frankly, it's a burden on your own community or your own administration, because you have to manage all that. Now, they pay for it, but you're dealing with different prisoners and you're dealing with different issues. So a lot of counties choose not to do it, not because of the politics, but because of the, if you will, the burden of dealing with it all. So now that we've been through all these different generations of the issue of immigration, there are several factors that make this important. One, the city council and mayor elections that just occurred. There are organizations in this town that made ending the ICE contract the most important issue facing Nashville. And so they would interview council candidates and mayoral candidates and say, would you agree, if you're elected to any of these seats, our priority is that we end the ICE contract, end this thing we're talking about. So a variety of people, a large number of people who ran for city council and mayors were having to say, yes, I would do that. Now understand, there was only one council member out of the 40 seats plus candidates who ever even called and asked, what is a contract? So they've promised to do it. You mentioned Marsha Blackburn earlier. Marsha Blackburn's a person who won a seat because she promised to never raise taxes without understanding the taxes. And we've all criticized that in 1994, I believe it was. Because you shouldn't sign on to pledges without understanding what is the impact of your pledge. And so I was disappointed that there's a lot of people who won seats and ran for office without even understanding both sides of the issue, and then saying, yes, I promise to end a contract they know nothing about. So that was brewing in the background of ending this contract, and I kept saying, I can't believe everybody is this wound up over a contract that is minuscule. Okay, less than 1%.
When you say less than one, just how many people, how many heads?
4,000 people a month go to jail, 11 people.
Okay. So it's not like we're talking hundreds of people all of a sudden or whatever. It's
now, I understand if you care about the subject of immigration that you want a victory so bad, you will make it a priority that this makes it more welcoming to Nashville. I don't agree with that at all, because we're talking about a contract to house once you've been identified and held by
So that's already done. All you're doing is housing.
Housing. And it's a location where they were arrested, which you would think would benefit them to stay.
Was it just becoming, because of that, and you're right, politically speaking, and the mayor and the council members saying they would overturn it. That it was just becoming too much of a distraction for the sheriff's department, as you're hearing back and
I
forth.
would have stacks of cards sent from all over the country about how racist I am and how this is a pipeline to Trump. I would have mass emails. And the point of this whole thing is, it's a distraction, but it's also an inordinate amount of my time really explaining what is a contract that represents less than 1% of the people. I've been on the show many years, and if you go back and add it up all the time I've talked about immigration, it might hit 1%. I'm not sure.
No, you're right.
Sure.
We don't.
If the city of Nashville and the activists of Nashville will focus their passion on resolving something that represents 30 to 35% of the people coming to jail, we could change the country. I mean, less than 1% of the people. I have protesters in front of my office. I have phone calls. I have mass mailings. I have all this criticism. I'm on a list of the top 10 most hated people in the country. Okay, the reality of all this is, if we want to do something that impacts immigrants, African Americans, whites, people 18 years old and 80 years old that are all going to jail today, which is over 30% of the people, if the passion was behind that, we could change the country.
Yeah, but instead it's
But instead, the most important issue, you said today, we have a U.S. Senator commenting about this. On my phone, I had someone send me last night, a presidential leading contender on the Democratic side is proud of Nashville. Less than 1% of the people. If this is the most important issue in our city, when we don't have money, our schools are in trouble, law enforcement has its own concerns, we've got all sorts of complicated issues around Nashville, but this becomes the number one thing, less than 1% of our community is impacted. Now, I understand it makes me sound like I don't care about that less than 1% of the people. What I tell people is, then you don't care about the 30 other % of the people, and you don't care about the African Americans and white people going to jails and prisons all over the country who have been displaced by their family, who didn't trust the government, who didn't have a legitimate opportunity for a job. No one is protesting my house. No one is standing over here sending me 4,000 cards. And we've misrepresented how many people in our community are impacted by this. I mean, I read this rent a bed, all this stuff yesterday, even after we ended it. And what is so frustrating is the facts get in the way of their story, whoever they are. The right, Miss Blackburn, and the left, both of them. The facts don't support either one of their positions.
That, unfortunately, is the reality to some degree in this day and age. And it's just, if the facts don't fit what you believe, and what you believe can be based on something you don't fully understand because you haven't taken the time. And we know how heated this issue of immigration is. So people have strong opinions. Unfortunately, a lot of people have those based on erroneous information. It's just the way it is.
In my opinion, I have bigger issues I want to deal with, and it takes an inordinate amount of my time to defend this thing, just like right now, where it's okay. And look, we didn't make an announcement yesterday that we're ending a housing contract. Less than 1% of the people come into jail. No one, every network was there, every national news, had all these people were stirred up over it. Last night I was telling you, during that time, during the last 24 hours, we've booked 40 people who don't know what day it is, who are literally ill instead of criminal. No one has said a word. I bet I can't get people to show up to do that. And so our community and our world of our priorities is so out of whack that, in my opinion, it doesn't help me to continue. The housing doesn't help me a bit. This contract does not, I don't get the revenue from it, far from what the activists in this town have run around telling everybody for years, that we're benefiting from. No, the city council and the mayor's office receives the funds. The people who were forcing me to try to end the contract, they didn't know they were getting the money. The money is not the sheriff's office. What do I benefit from it? I don't. My theory had always been that if ICE wants you at the conclusion of your local time, leaving you here for 3, 4, or 5 days while that's transitioning actually helps the individual. Your family members who care about you, we saw this happen, wrap up some business, some family arrangements, some things that are going to happen.
Now family's not going to know. They're going to be gone, like you said, could be in the middle of the night when this...
Right, and no one trusts me. I understand that. They don't trust that is the right thing because it's coming from me. So the leaders in the immigrant community said, we're willing to do that. We're willing to let that happen so we can say we ended the contract. Okay? We ended the contract.
Isn't that crazy? All right, listen, let's take a quick call from Butch. Butch, are you there? Go ahead, Butch. Hi,
Hello.
Butch. Hi, Butch. Go ahead.
Okay, but it's Dutch. D-U-T-C.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dutch. I apologize.
No problem. Hey, Sheriff.
Yes, sir.
I'm a retired sheriff out of Nevada and Arizona.
Well, nice to see you.
And I don't understand what your problem is, for crying out loud. Back in my day, and I'm in almost 90, back in my day, we begged the government to house their inmates, and we couldn't get any cooperation from them. So what's the problem now? We used to try to we'd pick up out there in Nevada and Arizona, pick up a illegal immigrant. I picked up a bus full with 62 people in it one time, and the government said, "Oh yeah, we're on our way." And they waited 3 days and then called us and said, "Oh well, we're a little too busy to come get them." So this is baloney. Counties hire or rent out their jail to make money. That's it.
Right, I mean, the money does come in. Yeah, well, obviously, and I believe what he's saying.
Right.
Times have changed, though. That's for sure.
Right, and what Dutch is saying is interesting too, because I met with a lot of the leaders, I think, in the immigrant community over the last several months. I meet with a lot of people, not just because of this, but I met with the ACLU. I do that 2 or 3 times a year and discuss issues. I met with council members that cared a lot about this subject, and I told all of them, this isn't new. I mean, we're all making this a new subject. This has been going on for many, many, many years. There's been a contract for many years. And so and Dutch is right, most systems like ours build jails where they're not completely full the day you open them. And so those beds that you've already paid to build oftentimes are contracted out, take ICE out of it for the U.S. Marshal, BOP.
Oh, yeah.
And most counties would beg for that because it helps offset your debt service and your cost of operation. And so, and we will continue to do that with U.S. Marshal inmates. They have nothing to do with immigration. They're federal inmates. They'll be reimbursed, as Dutch said. You know, most people, I think, want that in the systems that we're operating. Here's the difference. I think it's easy to hear me talking or hear what I'm saying as that I believe immigrants are bad people. I don't believe that. I don't believe people who are coming in the jail right now are bad people. They make bad decisions. Yeah, I think it's a wrong decision to violate the law. If coming in the country requires certain things, you should have that. Told my son yesterday, you need to go get your new license. The requirement is you do X, Y, and Z. My point is, you're not a bad person for sneaking in the country. I'd probably do it too, if the circumstances were what they are. But I would also want people to understand that I send people to prisons every day. I don't judge them for it. The courts have done that. I didn't make the laws. Legislatures do that. But when I do that, I'm not called a racist for sending someone to prison. But I'm called a racist for sending someone to immigration because the immigration system is broken. So is the criminal justice system. The laws we have about drugs are ridiculous in a lot of ways. A lot of people go to jails and prisons that shouldn't, in my opinion, because of the way the laws are structured. But that doesn't mean I get to stand out there and say, ignore that one, let's ignore that one. Let's take that one out of it. And so what people ask you to do and try to make you feel is that because you believe a contract to house people after ICE says they want them, that makes you, me, non-sympathetic to the needs of immigrants. It's ridiculous. And because I send a lot more people the other directions from jails and prisons, and no one calls me that. And the life that they're about to face in a prison is far worse than being deported. I don't care what they say. And you know how I know that? I'm pumping gas a few years ago. An African-American male walked up to me, he's taller than I was. I won't ever forget this. I was pumping gas, and he walked up to me. This was all over the news during the time what all was going on in immigration. He walked up to me and he said, I wish you'd have just sent me home. Now, think about that. So what is wrong with holding accountable whatever the process is? I didn't decide the law. Change the law. If the passion to go change the law at the federal level could move the law, it needs to be fixed, federal law. Instead, it targets the local because it gets attention.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's happened. Well, listen, we'll take a break on that note. We got more calls and some other things. You talk about the jail, and it is interesting, the cost overruns, which, you know, everything costs more than you think it is. We'll get into it more with the sheriff and more of your calls right after this. Stay with us.